Hi, today we are going to do, as you can see, sentence equivalence exercise number 8. I hope you've got your books with you, book number 1 of our Jeeva's material. We are doing exercise number 8. So let's start with the first question. I'm going to read the question. Please follow me on your book and then we discuss it. It is almost always desirable to increase the yield of a crop if dash increases are not also necessary in energy, labor and other inputs of crop production. The sentence tells us that it would be desirable to increase the yield of a crop, but there is a condition. What is the condition? If dash increase are not also necessary in labor, energy and other inputs of crop production. Obviously, when a farmer tries to increase his crop, he has to spend some money on other things like increased amount of money on energy, on labor, on, let's say, on buying seeds and other things. So what would make this possible or desirable for the farmer to increase his crops? Only if the increases are not equal to the amount of money he is going to spend on the energy, labor and other inputs. So I am going to put in my own words, it is almost always desirable to increase the yield of a crop if equal increases are not necessary in energy. Proportionate increases makes good sense with the word equal. It cannot be compatible. Option D. Compatible. Compatible is a word that we associate with anything that is an agreement. Two people who can get along with each other are considered to be compatible. A married couple who have a very close relationship, who agree or see eye to eye on major issues, are said to be compatible with each other. Now that doesn't make sense with this context, but definitely the word commensurate. Commensurate, if you look at this word, mensurate, measure, commensurate, equal. So basically, commensurate, equal in measure is making very appropriate sense. So let's read it again. It is almost always desirable to increase the yield of a crop if proportionate, commensurate, increases are not also necessary in energy, labor and other inputs of crop production. The word equivocal, option C, is meant to misguide you, mislead you, because many times you might look at the word equivocal and think it means equal. Though the word equi begins with equal, it ends with the word vocal, which is connected with voice. So equivocal is something that you would make as a statement. Now, what do you say when you are equivocal? Basically, your statement or what you say could end up being ambiguous. You are not being precise in your statement, most probably because you want to misguide the person or you want to avoid speaking the truth. So, equivocal is a word I wouldn't go with this. Nor would I go with the word predetermined, option E. Predetermined is something that has been decided beforehand. Measured is a quantity, so that doesn't make sense. So we go with options A and B for question number 1. Question number 2, let's read the question. Inspired by interim responses to hitherto unknown problems, New Deal economic stratagems became dashed as a result of bureaucratization. Their flexibility and adaptability destroyed by their transformation into rigid policies. Whose flexibility? What is this there refer to? There refers to the New Deal economic stratagems. So what we are told here is the New Deal economic stratagems flexibility and adaptability has been destroyed and it has been transformed. These stratagems have been transformed into rigid policies. So this is an explicit information question. That means there is a clear idea about what is needed for the blank. If the flexibility of the stratagems have been and adaptability of the stratagems have been destroyed and become rigid, then the inference to be drawn is New Deal economic stratagems have become rigid. The word that goes for the blank would be rigid. I would choose the word rigid for the blank. Now we need to look among the options a word that goes along with the word rigid. Now option A, politicized, something that is made public or political doesn't make sense. What is ungovernable? Ungovernable is unmanageable, again doesn't make sense. The word ossified. Ossified comes from the word ossify, which means to make hard like bone. So anything that is calcified and becomes hard like stone becomes ossified. You know, the fossils, which are the buried remains of extinct animals, are nothing but the calcified remains of them. They are being ossified to become fossils. So anything ossified therefore has to become rigid and unbreakable. So therefore, breakable. So therefore, ossified can be fixed into this context with rigid. Now consolidated, option D cannot make sense. Consolidated is something that is strengthened, and streamlined is something that has been organized. That doesn't make sense. Now let's look at the word obdurate. Now obdurate is a word that we associate with an attitude. What kind of an attitude makes a person hard? Obdurate. Hard, unbending, stiff, unyielding, and finally rigid, inflexible. So obdurate is a word that we use for someone who is very stubborn or obstinate as well. In the context of the sentence, the word obdurate definitely goes with the context of the inflexible or rigid. So therefore, inspired by interim responses to the two unknown problems, New Deal economic stratagems became option C, ossified, and option F, obdurate, as a result of bureaucratization. Their flexibility and adaptability destroyed by the transformation into rigid policies. Question number 3. Edith Wharton sought in a memoir to present herself as having achieved a harmonious wholeness by having dashed the conflicting elements of her life. Now, Edith Wharton is writing a memoir. What is a memoir? Memoir is a French word for an autobiography. So she's presenting her life, herself, as what? As having achieved a harmonious wholeness. So if you want to present your life as being harmonious, then what should be done to the conflicts in your life? If I have conflicts in my life and I want to make my life harmonious, then obviously I have to see that those conflicts are resolved. Those conflicts are brought into some kind of resolution. So here, the inference to be drawn is if Edith Wharton wants to present her life to be harmonious, then she must do something to bring about harmony, to bring about a resolution to those conflicting elements. So looking at this idea, let's look at the options. By having affirmed option A, how can you simply affirm? Affirm, which is to confirm. By confirming those conflicting elements, you can't bring harmony. By highlighting the conflicting elements, you cannot bring harmony. But what is reconcile? Reconcile is to patch up, to come back to someone and bring about an agreement between both of you. So if you reconcile the conflicting elements, the implication is you're bringing about an agreement. And another word that goes with reconcile is conciliate. Conciliate is to make peace. Conciliate is to come to some kind of a harmonious agreement by making peace. So the two options that make excellent sense in the context would be Edith Wharton sought in a memoir to present herself as having achieved a harmonious wholeness by having reconciled, option E, conciliated, the conflicting elements of her life. Confine. Confine is to restrict or stop from, let's say, expanding. That doesn't make sense. Nor does the word by simply identifying, you're not going to bring about any kind of harmony. So the options C and E are the answers for question number 3. The fourth question. The well-trained engineer must understand fields as diverse as physics, economics, geology, and sociology. Thus, an overly engineering curriculum should be avoided. Where is the thought extender? Where is the conclusion? The conclusion begins with the conjunction thus. Thus, an overly dashed engineering curriculum should be avoided. Why should such an engineering curriculum be avoided? The missing word. We are given clear indication. What kind of fields must the engineer become an expert on? An engineering student must be expert on physics, economics, geology and sociology. He calls it as diverse. If it is a diverse subjects that you are supposed to become experts on, then what kind of curriculum would be avoided? The opposite. The opposite of diverse curriculum should be avoided would be what I would go for. Now, right away I can focus on a very simple answer, and that would be option B. A narrow, there's an overly narrow curriculum. Engineering curriculum should be avoided, makes excellent sense. Now, let us eliminate the choices. For example, option F, academic. Every curriculum is academic, so there is no question of eliminating it. What is innovative? Innovative, innova, nova, which is new. So, innovative would make it creative, novel. Now, we are not looking at whether we are looking at old or new curriculums, nor are we looking at competitive curriculums, nor are we looking at rigorous curriculums. Now, what is left after eliminating all these choices is nothing but option A, insular. Now, insular is a word that we essentially use for being completely obstructed from expansion, from growing. For example, people belonging to an island, in an island, lead a life of insulation because they are surrounded by water on all sides. If you look at an electric wire, it is coated with a plastic coating, which is called as an insulation. What does it do? It prevents the electricity from coming out. So when do you become insular? When you become isolated, or when there is a too narrow confines to what you are doing. So that in this context also makes good sense. So the well-trained engineer must understand fields as diverse as physics, economics, geology and sociology. Thus, an overly, option A, insular, option B, narrow engineering curriculum should be avoided. Question number 5. Imposing steep fines on employers for on-the-job injuries to workers could be an effective dash to creating a safer workplace, especially in the case of employers with poor safety records. Now, in this particular question, we are told about the government employing steep fines on employers. For what? They are imposing steep fines for job injuries to workers. Now, this question goes on to tell us what would be the impact of imposing these steep fines on the employers. It says it could be an effective dash. Now, let's concentrate on what it says after the blank. To creating a safer workplace, especially in the case of employers with poor safety records. So, if the government is going to impose steep fines, would it encourage the employers to have safer workplace, or would it discourage them to have safer workplace? Obviously, it would encourage them to have safer workplace because they don't want to pay those excessive fines. So, we are looking out for a word that goes with encouragement. So, imposing steep fines on employers for on-the-job injuries to workers could be an effective encouragement to creating a safer workplace. Now, let's see if we can find a word that goes with encouragement. Option A says antidote. An antidote acts against an infection. Any kind of an antidote acts as a counter against any kind of, let us say, harm, any kind of problem. An antidote can be used in order to remove the problem, in order to, let us say, act against the problem. But if you see the question, after the blank you don't have a problem, you have a safer workplace. So antidote cannot be an encouragement here, nor does addition to creating make sense. Now let's talk about the word deterrent. A deterrent is the exact opposite of what we are looking for. A deterrent acts as something that deterrent discourages you from doing it. So, now I would use the word deterrent if after the blank you have to creating an unsafe workplace. But here we have safer workplace, we are ruling out C. Now an alternative to creating a safer workplace doesn't make much sense. What is the word that goes with encouragement? An incentive. An incentive is given to you to encourage you, to push you to do something more. So definitely an effective incentive. And another word that goes with encouragement is a spur. Now spur is the small instrument used on a horse. It's like a nail-like, tool that is attached to the boots of a horse rider, and he presses it on the flank of the horse to make it run faster. So spur is most often used as something that pushes you, that encourages you to do something good. So here the two words that make sense is incentive and spur for the blank. Let's read it. Imposing steep fines on employers for on-the-job injuries to workers could be an effective incentive spur to creating a safer workplace, especially in the case of employers with poor safety records. The sixth question. With its maverick approach to the subject, Sheer Heights' book has been more widely debated than most. The media throughout the country have brought the author's opinions to the public's attention. Now, in this particular question, we are told about the approach of the author. Her approach to her book has been maverick. So a very important clue is provided by the word maverick. Her approach to the book has been maverick, and her book has been most debated. It has been widely debated. So these become two vital clues as to why or what the author's opinions are. Now, a maverick is a word that we associate most often with a person who is either a social rebel, a person who is a social rebel, who rebels against the conventions of the society. A maverick would be someone who breaks the rules, and therefore a person who acts or behaves in a manner which is, rebellious would definitely result in being debated, because a debate is usually an argument that happens when there is any kind of a debatable issue. So here, her book has been more widely debated than most, obviously because of her maverick opinions. So the media throughout the country have brought the author's what opinions? Her maverick opinions, her debatable opinions to the public's attention. This is an explicit information question. So, maverick, debatable. The simple word I would therefore give here is controversial. Anything that is going to create this kind of debates, this kind of issues, this kind of divided or split opinions would end up becoming a controversy. So I would say her controversial opinions to the public's attention. Right away our eyes fall on option F, which says controversial. Now let's eliminate the choices. Authoritative cannot be controversial. Popular cannot be controversial. Who's articulate? Articulate is usually used for a person who can speak clear, cogent, and convincing. A person who can speak in a convincing, clear, or cogent manner, whose speech has the right words in the right place is articulate. Now that doesn't make sense in the context. So what is left with us after eliminating all the choices is option D, because conclusive also cannot be right. Polemical. Now polemical is a very commonly used word on the GRE, and this word comes from the word pole. Suppose I say these two people are like the North Pole and the South Pole. What would you mean? What would I mean? It would mean that they are very different and opposites to each other in their views. So from there comes the word polarity. Polarity is a split or division that happens when there is a movement in two opposite directions. So therefore we have the word polemical for any kind of a subject matter that can create this kind of a split or division in the society. So polemical becomes therefore controversial. becomes disputatious. It becomes contentious. So, polemical therefore is definitely controversial. So, we choose that as the second option. With its maverick approach to the subject, Sheer Heights' book has been more widely debated than most. The media throughout the country have brought the authors controversial, and then finally our last selection, polemical, opinions to the public's attention. Let's now move to the seventh question. Congress is having great difficulty developing a consensus on energy policy, primarily because the policy objective of various members of Congress rest on such dash assumptions. So we are told very clearly that Congress is having difficulty reaching a consensus. What's a consensus? A consensus is a common agreement. They are not able to come to a common agreement on energy policies. When will the Congress not be able to come to a common agreement? When obviously the policy objective of the various members of Congress rest on such, I would say, very different kind of assumptions. So, in that sense, it cannot be explicit, which means very clear. It cannot be commonplace, which means something that has no originality. Definitely, it can be irreconcilable. Just now we discussed about reconcile, to come to an agreement. When will you be irreconcilable? Sometimes, a couple who is going for a divorce quote in their document that they are going for a divorce because they have irreconcilable disagreement. They have irreconcilable opinions. Irreconcilable therefore means you can never come to an agreement. So here, obviously the members are not able to come to an agreement, they are not able to reach a consensus. So I would go with option C, irreconcilable. It cannot be trivial, option D. Trivial is petty, unimportant, negligent. And option E also looks very promising, divergent. Divergent means coming from various different diverse backgrounds. So let's put them together. Congress is having great difficulty developing a consensus on energy policy, primarily because the policy objective of various members of Congress rest on such irreconcilable, divergent assumptions. The eighth question. Only by ignoring decades of mismanagement and inefficiency could investors conclude that a fresh infusion of cash would provide anything more than a dash solution to the company's financial woes. Now, this company obviously is suffering from decades from mismanagement and inefficiency. And we are here told that a set of investors have now come and invested some cash into this company. Now, these investors, we are told, only if they could ignore all these years of mismanagement inefficiency could they conclude that by merely putting this money in this company, it could provide them a dash solution. Now, let's look at this. Anything more than a. Now, anything more than a is nothing but not. If I say if I say something like he's nothing more than a clerk, it means he's hardly anything more than a clerk. It's a kind of a term that you could use for putting down. So here he says that by ignoring all these problems, this investors could therefore conclude that by putting this money, it would provide a dash. I'm going to remove this not or anything more than, and I'm going to think about what kind of a solution. I would say that by putting this money, they would think that this money by itself would provide a complete solution, a proper solution, right, to the company's financial woes. Now, if you're going to put a negative phrase before that, if I'm going to have complete for the blank, then I need to put the opposite, right? Like if I say I'm sad, I have to say I'm not happy, right? So if you want to say this is a complete solution, then the not before the blank says it is the opposite. Now, therefore, anything more than a complete I'm ruling out, but I'm going with anything more than a temporary. The moment I say anything more than temporary, it means a long-lasting solution. Now, anything more than a superficial solution, in the context it doesn't make that much sense. Let's see. Genuine. Genuine is something that is proven to be true. Complete, we have ruled out already. Why should it be anything more than a realistic solution? That means it becomes unrealistic. The moment I say anything more than a fleeting solution, it becomes a long-lasting solution again. So the two negative words in this context become positive. Let's read it. Only by ignoring decades of mismanagement and inefficiency could investors conclude that a fresh infusion of cash would provide anything more than a temporary, anything more than a fleeting solution to the company's financial woes. The ninth question. A misconception frequently held by enormous writers is that sentence structure mirror thought. The more convoluted the structure, the more dash the ideas. Misconception? A false idea, a mistaken idea, a wrong idea. What kind of writers? Novice writers, inexperienced writers. So obviously these inexperienced writers have made a mistake in thinking that the sentence structure, the way you construct a sentence is a sentence structure. It mirrors the thought, it reflects the thought. That means the more convoluted the structure of the sentence, now this is an explicit information question. What word can we put in the blank in the sentence itself? I would put the word convoluted. The more convoluted the structure, the more convoluted the ideas. Convoluted, complicated. So, I am looking out for a word complicated and there I find it bang, option C, complicated. Not blatant, open and shamelessly doing something. Not elementary, simple. Not fanciful, which is based on imagination. Not inconsequential, which is unimportant. But definitely there is a possibility that intricate could be right. Intricate also becomes very complex and complicated. So, a misconception frequently held by novice writers is that sentence structure mirrors thought. The more convoluted the structure, the more complicated, the more intricate the ideas. Question number 10. Though feminist in its implications, Yvonne Rainer's 1974 film dashed the filmmaker's active involvement in feminist politics. Question begins with a contrast. Though this particular film made in 1974, we are told was feminist in its implications. Implications? Stating something indirectly. So this movie she made in 1974 indirectly showed her feminist inclinations. Now we are told though this film made in 1974 showed feminism in its implications, dash the filmmaker's active involvement in feminist politics. So in this film she is showing it indirectly. So the inference to be drawn is she must have become actively involved in politics, in feminist politics later. So 1974 film must have predated or been made before she became actively involved. So the two words that make sense with this context would definitely be option F. Antedated. Antedate, something that happens before a particular date. So antedate would mean that this film made in 1974, antedated, was made before she became actively involved in politics and feminist politics. And the other word that is a synonym for antedated is forewent. So obviously forewent, for to go before. So therefore this movie forewent the filmmaker's active involvement in feminist politics. So though feminist in its implication, Yvonne Rainer's 1974 film forewent, antedated the filmmaker's active involvement in feminist politics. With that we come to the end of exercise number 8.